A frantic bark sliced through the night. Bella, Maya Bennett's wolf-gray German Shepherd, tore into the blizzard and ignored every command. Maya knew that sound not a chase panic. She ran with her flashlight and found a man collapsed at her fence, breath thin as thread blood staining the snow. A dog tag flashed, Marcus Luttrell. Under his torn jacket, a tiny green light blinked like an eye. Bella pressed back to Maya's leg, steady as a heartbeat, as if reminding her, breathe, choose mercy. He wasn't just hurt, he was being hunted. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Snow came down over Idaho's Sawtooth Mountains like a furious god shaking out a white cloak, erasing roads, swallowing power lines, and turning the valley into a blank page with teeth. Maya Bennett lived in a small cabin tucked among lodgepole pines, where the wind could only find her by listening. She was 28, about average height, but wiry from years of hauling medical packs and climbing switchbacks, with olive-fair skin that winter made look almost translucent and hands permanently roughened by rope and cold metal. Her dark hair was usually twisted into a practical knot, but grief had loosened it into a habit of neglect, strands escaping like unanswered questions. People used to describe her as steady, the kind of woman who spoke only when it mattered and whose eyes seemed to measure a situation before her mouth entered the room. That steadiness had been trained, first by wilderness EMS work, then by a single awful day that cracked her world in half. Since then, she kept her life quiet on purpose. No parties, no town gossip, no, "How are you holding up?" Conversations that smelled like pity. Silence was the only thing she could control, so she treated it like a sacred object and dusted it daily. The cabin reflected that discipline. Neat stacks of firewood, a first aid kit with labeled compartments, a kettle always set on the stove as if hope were a routine. Outside, a sagging fence marked the boundary between her land and the larger wilderness, the place where elk crossed like silent pilgrims and coyotes sang their thin, hungry hymns. Bella, however, had never agreed to worship silence. Bella was a German Shepherd, 5 years old, 80 pounds of athletic loyalty, with a wolf-gray coat and a black saddle pattern, her ears sharp as commas, her eyes warm amber that could turn stern in a heartbeat. She had been Maya's partner for 3 winters, officially a working dog, trained for search and tracking, unofficially the cabin's heartbeat monitor. Bella moved like a question in motion, always checking the world, always returning to Maya as if to say, still here, still breathing. It wasn't only instinct, it was devotion, the kind that doesn't ask permission. That night, the power went out with a soft click, as if the storm had simply pinched the valley's candlewick. The cabin fell into oil lamp light, and the shadows grew longer, more theatrical. Maya lit the lamp with practiced calm, but inside her chest something tightened anyway. She'd learned that darkness had a talent for dragging old memories into the room and seating them at the table. She tried to focus on small, practical tasks, the way she used to in emergencies. Check the latch, stack another log, fill the kettle. Bella lay near the door, chin on her paws, pretending to be asleep while her ears tracked the world's invisible angles. Then Bella's head snapped up, not casual, not curious, alarmed. A low rumble rolled up from her chest, a sound like distant thunder deciding whether to become lightning. Maya froze, breath caught halfway, her mind offering a list of explanations it liked better. Deer, fallen branch, a stray dog. Bella rose and moved to the door, posture rigid, nose working fast. She made one sharp sound, not a bark for attention, but a bark for truth. "Easy, girl," Maya murmured, though her own voice didn't sound convinced. She opened the door just a crack and the blizzard shoved its shoulder into the gap, flinging icy grains against her face. The cold didn't simply enter, it invaded, a gray streak vanishing into the white. "Bella, no!" Maya grabbed her coat, jammed on boots without lacing them properly, and followed with a flashlight that felt laughably small against the storm's roar. Snow stung her cheeks. The beam carved a weak tunnel through the spinning white, revealing nothing, then everything, then nothing again. She could barely see the porch steps beneath her feet. Her pulse hammered with a fear she hated, the same fear that had once made her feel helpless, the same fear she'd sworn never to kneel before again. Bella didn't run in panic. She ran with purpose, angling toward the fence line as if the night had whispered coordinates. Maya forced her legs through deepening drifts, lungs burning, the wind stealing any swear words she tried to throw at it. She found Bella near the fence, standing over a dark shape half buried in snow. At first, Maya's mind rejected it as a person. People did not simply appear out here. People belonged to roads and gas stations and warm conversations. Out here, there were only weather and consequences. The flashlight beam landed, and the shape became a man. He wore tactical clothing that had surrendered to ice, his face pale under a crust of snow. He looked about 35, broad-shouldered and strong even in collapse, with a square jaw dusted by stubble and a nose that had likely been broken once and healed with stubborn pride. His lips were tinged blue from cold, and his breathing, when it came thin and spaced out, like a radio signal fading. There was a disciplined stillness to him, even unconscious, as if his body had been taught to conserve energy in hostile places. Maya dropped to her knees beside him, gloves already off, fingers searching his neck for a pulse. She found it, faint but present, a stubborn little drum refusing to quit. Relief hit her so hard it almost hurt. Then anger followed, sharp and immediate. At him for being here, at the storm for being itself, at the universe for always finding new ways to test people who were already tired. Bella pressed in close, whining softly, then shoved her muzzle under Maya's hand, grounding her. It was an old trick, one Bella used when Maya's mind started spinning too fast. "Okay," Maya whispered, not to the man but to herself. "One step." She slid her arms under him, felt his weight, felt how the cold had turned him heavy and dragged him toward the cabin. Bella trotted beside them, repeatedly bumping Maya's hip like a metronome, reminding her to keep moving. By the time Maya slammed the door behind them, her muscles shook, her hair was full of snow, and her breath came out in frantic bursts. She laid the man on the floor by the hearth and fed the fire until it answered with warmth. Under the lamp's glow, she found an ID tucked inside his jacket. The name read, Marcus Luttrell. The photo showed the same hard angles and calm eyes, a face built for endurance and difficult decisions. Maya's throat tightened. A Navy SEAL. A man like this didn't stumble into a blizzard by accident. She began to strip off his outer layers to warm him safely, her medic instincts clicking into place like a familiar toolkit. Bella sat close, watching, ears twitching, a guardian made of fur and faith. Maya's fingers brushed the inside lining of Marcus's jacket, and she paused. Something small and square was stitched in deliberately, too precise to be a random object. She carefully worked the seam open with her pocket knife. A tiny black device slid into her palm, sealed tight, and a pinprick green light blinked in slow rhythm, patient as a predator. Maya stared at it as the fire cracked and the storm screamed outside. Bella's gaze lifted to Maya's face, as if asking the question first. In the cabin's fragile circle of light, Maya understood a terrible truth. The blizzard was not the only thing hunting tonight. What was that blinking green eye calling toward her door? And who had Marcus Luttrell been running from? Wind worried the cabin like a hungry animal, scraping nails of ice along the logs, but inside the lamp made a small island of gold where breathing could pretend to be normal. Maya had not slept. She sat in her grandfather's old rocker, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled faintly of smoke and cedar, listening to the fire pop like it was trying to speak in code. The blinking tracker sat on the kitchen table under an overturned glass, as if shame could be contained by transparency. Bella paced in slow, deliberate loops, checking corners, checking the door, checking Maya's face, her tail low but steady. Maya's mind kept trying to build bridges between facts that didn't want to connect. A Navy SEAL at her fence, a tracker hidden in his jacket, a blizzard that arrived like it had been scheduled. She kept touching her own wrist as if to confirm she was still in her body. The man by the hearth finally stirred, not with the confused flailing of civilians, but with the controlled tension of someone waking in hostile territory. His eyes opened in a single clean motion, scanning the room with sharp awareness, then landing on Maya, then Bella, then the windows. Even half frozen, he moved with the economy of a trained instrument. He pushed himself up on one elbow and winced, jaw tightening as pain clocked in like a late bill. "Don't sit up," Maya said, voice firm, the old medic tone returning like a uniform she'd forgotten still fit. She leaned closer, lamplight tracing the angles of his face. Up close, Marcus Luttrell looked like a man carved by weather and decisions. Broad brow, strong cheekbones, a scar that cut faintly through his right eyebrow, and eyes a clear gray-green that held both vigilance and an odd, stubborn kindness. His hair was cropped short, dark with flecks of frost still caught near his temple. He was in his early to mid-30s, built solid and functional, not gym pretty, more like someone who'd carried heavy things for a living and had learned the world didn't reward softness. Bella stepped forward, sniffed his bandaged sleeve, then sat back on her haunches with the strict expression of a nurse supervising a difficult patient. Marcus's gaze flicked to her and paused, as if recognizing an authority he could respect. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, then disciplined itself away. "Where am I?" he rasped, voice roughened by cold and dehydration. "My cabin," Maya said. "You were at the fence. You're lucky my dog has better sense than the storm." "Your dog," he murmured, and looked at Bella again. "She found me." Bella answered by pressing her nose to Maya's palm, a gentle shove that said, "Don't drift." Maya realized her fingers were trembling. She forced them still, one breath at a time, like Bella was teaching her how to be human again. Marcus tried to swing his legs, stopped when Maya's hand lifted in warning. He didn't argue. That told Maya more about him than any badge could. Authority didn't irritate him when it was earned. "Your Navy," Maya said, nodding toward the dog tags she'd placed beside the lamp. "Special operations." His eyes narrowed a fraction, not hostile, calculating. "SEAL," he confirmed. "How long was I out?" "Not long enough for me to decide whether I should be angry or terrified," Maya replied. Her attempt at humor landed like a snowball against armor, but Bella made a soft huff through her nose, which somehow gave Maya permission to keep going. "Why were you here?" Marcus's gaze drifted to the table, to the covered tracker. He held still for a beat too long. Then he exhaled, slow. "Because I couldn't go anywhere else." Maya crossed her arms, a posture that tried to look like control. "That doesn't explain the blinking green thing I found sewn into your jacket." Marcus's face tightened, not with surprise, but with the grimness of someone whose worst guess just became a fact. "You found it." "It found me," Maya said. "So start talking." He looked at her as if weighing how much truth her cabin could hold without collapsing. Then he spoke in short, clipped sentences, like he was rationing oxygen. "My team was running a quiet recon. Evidence collection. A private contractor is protecting a medical company that's been falsifying trial data, burying adverse results. People who talked disappeared. We got a lead on a transfer. His eyes flicked once, briefly, to the fire, as if seeing something else burning. We walked into an ambush. Maya's throat went tight. You're telling me a pharmaceutical mess put a Navy SEAL in my yard? It's not a mess, Marcus said softly. It's a machine. He shifted, careful. Under the blanket, his shoulder and side were wrapped. The stitches she'd placed weren't pretty, but they held. He studied her hands as if he could read her past by the way she'd bandaged him. You were trained, he noted. Wilderness EMT, Maya answered. The words tasted like a former life. Was. Marcus nodded once, like he understood the kind of loss hidden inside that tense little syllable. I'm carrying the only piece they can't erase, he said, and his fingers moved to the inside of his vest where something rigid pressed. Encrypted storage, proof, names, transfers, video. Maya felt heat rise behind her eyes, angry and sharp. She had fled here to avoid being pulled back into the world's cruelty, and the world had followed her anyway, dragging its barbed wire across her threshold. So your plan was to bleed out at my fence and hand me the apocalypse? Marcus met her anger without flinching. My plan was to live long enough to pass it to someone who can publish it. His voice softened by a degree. I didn't choose your cabin. Your dog chose my heartbeat. Bella, as if proud of her own role in destiny, walked to Marcus's boot and sniffed it. Her expression turned faintly judgmental. Wet leather and cold socks did not impress her. Maya barked out a laugh before she could stop it. It surprised her, that sound, like a window opening in a house that had been sealed for years. Marcus noticed. His eyes warmed briefly, the soldier's mask cracking at the edge. The laughter died when the distant rumble arrived. Not thunder. Engine. Heavy. Close. It rolled through the blizzard's howl like a drumbeat from an approaching army. Bella's ears snapped forward. She moved to the door, body low, and gave a warning growl that stayed carefully under control, as if she didn't want to waste sound. Marcus sat up an inch, pain or not, and his gaze sharpened into steel. Lights out, he whispered. Maya blew out the lamp. The cabin plunged into gray-blue darkness, lit only by the fire's embers. She crept to the window and peered through a crack in the curtain. Two bright headlights cut the storm, impossibly sure of the driveway in a whiteout. The vehicle stopped. The engine idled, then died. Footsteps on the porch, not frantic, not lost, measured, confident. A knock came, polite as Sunday. Maya's pulse hammered. She didn't own a gun. She owned a flare pistol, a hatchet, and a dog who weighed less than her fear, but more than her courage. Marcus pushed himself up, silent, positioning his body between her and the door, his stance protective despite his injuries. Bella stood at his side like a living oath. Maya opened the door a few inches, chain latched. Wind clawed at the gap. A man stood there wearing a black coat with the kind of clean tailoring that didn't belong in mountains. He was in his 40s, tall and straight-backed, with hair cut short and neat, cheeks smooth-shaven, and eyes an icy pale color that seemed to reflect no warmth. His smile was practiced, calm, almost friendly, like a banker offering help, if the help came with fine print and a grave. "Ma'am," he said, voice smooth, not needing to raise itself over the wind as if the storm respected him. "Terrible night to be alone." Maya swallowed. "What do you want?" "I'm with Vanguard Response," he replied, producing an ID wallet too quickly to read. "We had a vehicle incident up the ridge. One of our personnel wandered off, disoriented. A man, injured, We're worried he'll freeze. He tilted his head, listening, as if hearing something inside. You haven't seen anyone, have you? Maya's mouth went dry. She forced her face into blankness. No. The man's smile remained, but it thinned slightly at the edges. That's odd, he said pleasantly. We had a thermal drone sweep before the weather got too dense. It picked up 2 distinct heat signatures in this cabin. The words hung in the air like a knife held by the blade. Behind Maya, Bella's growl deepened, quiet but unmistakable, and Marcus's presence became a silent wall. Maya lifted her chin. Your drone's wrong. The man's eyes flicked past her shoulder, just once, toward the darkness inside. He had heard Bella. He had felt Marcus. He simply chose to pretend otherwise. Probably, he agreed, still courteous. Cold plays tricks on machines. He reached into his pocket and placed something on the porch rail, a coin, matte silver, stamped with a small shield emblem. If you do see our missing man, he said, call this number. We'd be grateful. Maya did not reach for it. His smile returned to full shape, and that was somehow worse. Stay warm, he said, and turned away, footsteps steady as he disappeared into the storm. Maya closed the door, slid the bolt, and leaned against the wood as if it were the only solid thing left in the universe. Marcus exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. Bella pressed her shoulder into Maya's thigh, anchoring her. Outside, the engine started again, then faded into the blizzard like a promise postponed. If Vanguard had already seen 2 heat signatures, why hadn't they forced the door? What were they waiting for out there in the storm? And what did that little shield coin really mean? The night thickened until the cabin felt like a boat trapped inside a storm cloud, every gust hitting the walls with the steady insistence of knuckles on a coffin. Maya kept her eyes on the shield coin on the porch rail for as long as she could stand it, then finally pulled the curtain shut, like a judge ending a trial. Her stomach still churned from the man's polite threat, from the way he'd spoken about 2 heat signatures as if he were discussing a weather report. Marcus stood near the hearth, shoulders squared despite the bandage tugging at his side. He looked like he belonged in darkness, not because he loved it, but because he'd survived enough of it to stop arguing. Bella stayed close to Maya, positioning her body so it touched Maya's leg, a quiet reminder that even fear could be measured and managed. Marcus pulled a rugged satellite phone from an inner pocket, the kind of equipment that looked built to withstand war and rain and betrayal. He flipped the antenna up, powered it on, and watched the screen the way a man watches a door he expects to explode. The phone blinked, searched, then delivered a message in sterile letters. Interference detected. He tried again, changing angles, stepping closer to the window, then farther from it, as if he could outsmart the air. The same words appeared, calm as a sentence written in stone. They're jamming, he said, voice low. Not the storm. Maya's hands curled into fists inside her blanket. She had come here because isolation was supposed to be safety. Now it was a trap with a lock she hadn't chosen. So we can't call anyone, she whispered. Not from inside their bubble, Marcus replied. His eyes slid to the corners of the cabin, not in paranoia, but in assessment. They didn't knock to rescue me. They knocked to measure you. Bella made a soft, unsettled whine, then walked to the kitchen door and sat, watching it like it might confess something. Maya realized her breathing had gone shallow. Bella's ears twitched, and she pressed her nose to Maya's palm again, steadying her. The dog's warmth was a small, stubborn sun. Marcus moved into action. It wasn't dramatic. It was ritual. He dragged the heavy couch in front of the large living room window, then shoved the bookcase beside it, turning soft furniture into blunt armor. He wedged chairs under both doorknobs with the efficient logic of someone who'd fortified positions with less than this and lived. His movements were careful with injury but precise, the kind that made Maya's mind stop spinning and start watching. Watching was safer than imagining. Maya tried to help, but her body betrayed her at the worst moments. When she bent to lift a chair, an old injury in her right knee flashed hot, a memory of a rescue gone wrong 2 years ago when she'd slipped on black ice and heard something inside her leg pop like a branch. She'd healed, technically, but pain had its own opinions, and tonight it spoke loudly. She froze, embarrassed, anger turning inward, old shame rising like bile. Useless, her mind hissed. You ran away, and now you can't even lift a chair. Bella walked over, nudged the chair leg with her muzzle, then turned and nudged Maya's wrist, firm but gentle, like a grandmother who refused to let a child spiral. Bella trotted to the counter and nosed a flashlight off the shelf so it clattered at Maya's boots. The gesture was almost absurdly ceremonial. Here, this is yours. Be the light. Maya swallowed hard, picked it up, and felt something shift. Not courage exactly, something quieter. Consent. She clicked the flashlight on and took position by the hallway, where she could see the back door and the kitchen. She was no longer a passenger in her own fear. Minutes later, the cabin changed shape. The hearth's warmth remained, but the room had turned angular with barricades, shadows deepening behind furniture. The shield coin sat on the table now, a talisman of menace. Maya kept thinking of how the man had smiled, a smile like a church door held open while the wolves waited behind it. Marcus lifted the tracker device from under the glass, wrapped it in a dish towel, and tucked it into a metal tin. It'll still ping, he said, but if they're close enough, it won't matter. The bigger question is what they're timing. He winced as he lowered himself into a chair, breathing controlled. The way he held pain was disciplined, like he'd made a deal with it. You can stay, but you can't drive. A faint scraping sound threaded through the storm. It was so small that Maya thought she imagined it, a needle of noise hidden inside the blizzard's roar. Bella's head snapped toward the kitchen door, her ears pinned forward, her body lowered. The growl that rose out of her wasn't loud. It was focused, sustained, as if her ribs were a tuning fork vibrating with warning. Marcus saw it instantly. His eyes sharpened. He rose, silent, and motioned Maya back with 2 fingers. Maya's heart hammered, but she obeyed, flashlight beam trembling. Bella moved to the door that led to the utility crawl space and the small basement hatch Maya used for storage. The dog didn't bark. She listened. Her nose hovered near the bottom seam, reading scent the way humans read newspapers. The scraping stopped. A soft pop followed, muffled, metallic. Marcus's jaw set. He slid to the side of the door, shoulders square, like a man stepping into a ring. "When I open it," he whispered to Maya, "light the floor, only the floor." Maya nodded, throat dry. Marcus cracked the door. Cold air rose up with the smell of damp earth and machine oil. A thin beam of light flashed from below, quickly extinguished. Then a shadow moved, careful, trained, ascending. A man emerged, slim and compact, dressed in dark technical gear rather than combat armor, a tool bag slung over one shoulder. He looked mid to late 20s, pale with the strained expression of someone whose job was supposed to happen in silence. His hair was shaved close on the sides, longer on top, and plastered down with sweat. His hands were gloved, trembling slightly. He held a suppressed pistol, but the way he carried it lacked the confidence of a shooter. This was a technician, not a predator. Marcus moved like a closing door. One step, a sharp twist of the intruder's wrist, and the pistol clattered to the floor. A second motion pinned the man against the wall. The fight was over before it could become a fight. The intruder wheezed, fear pouring out of him in ragged breaths. "Please," he gasped. I'm not here to hurt anyone." His eyes darted to Maya and locked there, desperate, then to Bella's bared teeth. Bella didn't lunge. She just stood, body tight, the living shape of consequence. Marcus kept his voice quiet. "Name." The man swallowed. "Evan." He sounded like he hadn't used his own name in a long time. "Evan Rusk." "Who sent you?" Marcus asked. Evan's mouth opened, closed, then opened again, as if he were arguing with his survival instinct. "Vanguard," he whispered. They said recover the asset, sterilize the site." The phrase hit Maya like ice water poured down her spine. Sterilize, as if people were stains, as if mercy was a chemical. She tasted metal at the back of her throat, the kind she remembered from accident scenes and grief. Marcus's eyes went colder, not cruel, just clear. "The asset is me," he said, "or what I'm carrying." Evan shook his head violently. "Both," he blurted. You're not supposed to reach anyone. My job was to get in, find the sat phone, kill the uplink. They're setting the bubble. They're waiting for—" He swallowed hard, tears forming. "For the storm to cover it." Maya's flashlight beam trembled. She looked at Marcus and saw something in him harden, like a blade being drawn from a sheath. Yet Bella, sensing Maya's rising panic, stepped closer and pressed her side against Maya's leg, steady and warm. A small, ordinary kindness inside an extraordinary nightmare. Marcus bound Evan's wrists with duct tape and sat him down hard on a chair, keeping him alive, keeping him contained. He didn't gloat. He didn't rage. He simply made the problem smaller. Then he turned to Maya. "We can't transmit from here," he said, "but the jammer's a bubble. There's always an edge." Maya's mind flicked to an image she hadn't touched in years. Her father, a forest ranger with sun-browned skin and laugh lines, pointing to a ridge and saying, "There's an old fire lookout up there. You can see the whole valley." She remembered the narrow stairs, the wind up high, the way radio reception always improved as if the sky itself opened a hand. "The lookout tower," she said, voice thin but sure. "On West Ridge. It's old, but it's higher than the trees. If there's an edge to their bubble, that's where we'll find it." Marcus nodded once. "Then that's where we go." Bella lifted her head, eyes bright in the lamplight, as if the word go was a spell she liked. Outside, the storm roared, and somewhere within it, men with clean smiles and cold equipment waited for the night to finish doing their work. If they climbed to the lookout and lit up the sky with a signal, would the signal save them? Or would it paint a target on their backs before the truth could escape? They left the cabin before dawn could even consider showing its face, stepping into a world that had been bleached and weaponized by wind. The blizzard didn't merely fall, it pressed, a living force that shoved at their shoulders and tried to turn every decision into regret. Marcus moved with pain tucked neatly behind his ribs, the way disciplined men hide weakness like contraband. His bandaged side pulled when he breathed, and yet his posture stayed squared, protective, as if his body had been appointed a shield. Maya followed with her flashlight hugged to her chest. The beam swallowed almost instantly by the storm, and she hated how small her light looked against all that roaring white. Bella went first. The German Shepherd's wolf-gray coat had disappeared into the snow so completely she seemed more spirit than animal, a silent compass with amber eyes. She chose the path with a certainty that felt uncanny, pausing only to look back and make sure Maya was still moving, still breathing, still present. Maya's knee flared on every incline, a bright, sour reminder of her old injury, but Bella kept returning to press her shoulder into Maya's thigh, an insistence that translated into one command: forward. In the half-light, Maya realized what she'd been doing for years was not surviving, but hiding in a cabin-shaped shell. Now, the shell was cracking, and fear was pouring out, but so was something else, something stubbornly alive. The ridge trail climbed toward the old fire lookout tower, a relic from another era when men listened for smoke instead of signals. Up close, the tower looked like a skeletal altar of timber and iron bracing, stairs rising into the storm like a prayer no one wanted to finish. The wind up there wasn't wind anymore. It was a god's throat clearing, a high, relentless shriek that made Maya's eyes water and her teeth ache. Marcus signaled with 2 fingers, and they huddled behind a boulder at the base, letting their breathing settle. Bella sat tight against Maya's leg, radiating heat through fur and loyalty. Marcus pulled the satellite phone from his jacket with careful hands and powered it on. For a long, punishing second, the screen displayed the same cold sentence as the cabin: interference detected. Then, as if the air itself finally thinned, the message stuttered, vanished, and a weak signal bar appeared like a fragile candle flame refusing to die. Marcus exhaled, a sound half relief, half apology to the universe for still trying. He connected a small cable to the encrypted storage device and the phone, shielding the screen with his body. Maya held the cable steady, fingers numb and clumsy inside her gloves, whispering to herself like she used to in emergencies. Simple tasks, simple steps. Don't feed the panic. Bella pressed her full side into Maya's calf, a living blanket, and if the moment hadn't been so deadly, Maya might have laughed at how Bella seemed to believe warmth was a strategy that solved everything. In a way, it was. The upload began. 1%, 2%. Each number crawled upward with insulting slowness, as if truth had to drag itself through snowdrifts too. Marcus's eyes never left the horizon. He wasn't only watching for movement, he was watching for consequences. He'd spent his adult life learning that when you shine a signal into darkness, something in the dark looks back. Maya found herself staring at Marcus's profile, the set of his jaw, the calm in his gaze, the gentleness he used when he murmured a quiet, "good girl" to Bella without even looking down. He was brave, yes, but more than that, he was deliberate, a man who treated lives as precious even when the world treated them as disposable. Maya felt a strange, unwanted spark of gratitude that threatened to melt into tenderness, and she shoved it down because tenderness felt like a luxury she couldn't afford in a blizzard with hunters. At 17%, Bella stiffened. It was subtle, the way a candle's flame changes when a door opens in another room. Her ears tilted, her nose lifted, and her body angled slightly as if the wind had spoken a new language. Marcus didn't ask what she heard. He trusted her the way a sailor trusts a compass in fog. "Down," he whispered, and pulled Maya into cover behind the boulder. The next sound was small, sharp, and wrong, like the storm had clicked its tongue. A split second later, snow burst from the rock above them. Maya's heartbeat tried to escape her chest. There was no need for explanation, no room for disbelief. A marksman was out there, somewhere beyond sight, patient enough to aim through chaos. Marcus pressed his shoulder against the boulder, eyes narrowed, counting time and angles the way other people counted blessings. Bella crouched low, not barking, not panicking, simply leaning into Maya as if to lend her spine some borrowed steel. Maya realized she was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, and Bella nudged Maya's glove with her nose, grounding her, insisting she breathe. Marcus glanced at the screen. The upload continued, indifferent to terror. 21%, 24%, 31%. Each number felt like a step across a rope bridge. Another faint crack cut through the wind, and Marcus shifted them lower, tighter to the rock. Maya's mind flashed to the shield coin, to the man's calm smile, to the phrase "sterilize the site," and her stomach clenched. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run that wasn't also a target. Finally, the screen blinked. Complete. Marcus's eyes closed for one brief beat, as if he'd been holding his breath for an hour. "It's out," he said, voice rough with cold and something like relief. "We move. Now." They descended the tower stairs like ghosts, keeping low, using the boulder field as cover, Bella guiding them around drifts that looked harmless but hid slick ice. The marksman did not fire again, and that silence felt like another kind of threat, the kind that saves its teeth for later. By the time they reached the cabin, Maya's lungs burned and her knee throbbed, but her fear had changed shape. It wasn't just panic anymore. It had become focus. The back door of the cabin was slightly open. A thin wedge of darkness breathed out into the storm. Maya froze, every nerve turning sharp. Marcus lifted a hand, stopping her, then moved forward in slow, controlled steps, listening. Bella's hackles rose, not into a frenzy, but into a poised, protective readiness. Marcus eased the door wider, and the hinge squealed, a sound that felt too loud for the world. Inside, the barricades were disturbed, just enough to be unmistakable. In the snow near the threshold, tracks cut across their own. Larger boots, purposeful. Mixed among them were Bella's paw prints from earlier, now threaded with someone else's story. On the porch rail, the shield coin had returned. This time it wasn't lying flat. It had been pressed upright into the wood like an unblinking eye. Maya's throat tightened. Marcus stared at it for a long moment, the calm soldier expression slipping into something colder, something that understood what symbols meant when killers used them. Bella stepped closer to Maya and leaned into her leg again, as if saying, "Whatever this is, you are not alone in it." So who had slipped into the cabin while the storm covered their climb, and what had they taken? Or worse, what had they left behind to finish the sterilization they promised? The cabin's open back door breathed cold into the room, like a mouth left ajar by a careless god, and the shield coin, stabbed upright in the porch rail, watched them with a metallic, unblinking patience. Marcus didn't step inside right away. He stood, half-turned, listening to the house as if it could lie with silence. Then he lifted one hand to stop Maya with a quiet authority that didn't need volume. His face, lit by stormlight and the faint glow of snow, looked older than his years, in a way that wasn't about wrinkles, but about the number of hard choices stored behind his eyes. Maya's pulse thudded in her throat. She wanted to rush in because the cabin was hers, because people reach for familiar things when fear arrives, but Bella pressed against her shin, steady and warm, a reminder that familiar doesn't always mean safe. Marcus crouched, checked the threshold with careful focus, then signaled them away from the doorway. He didn't explain much, only said, "They've been inside. That means they can be anywhere." Maya felt her stomach drop, then harden into something like resolve. She had spent years building a life where nothing unexpected could enter. Tonight proved that walls weren't protection if a person's heart stayed locked too. Marcus guided them through the drifted yard toward the old barn, keeping the cabin behind them like a decoy he didn't trust anymore. The barn was a heavy timber structure that smelled of hay and cold iron, a darker kind of shelter where wind turned into a muffled growl. Inside, sound carried differently. Every breath, every boot shift, every nervous swallow sounded like confession. Bella moved with the silent certainty of an animal who understood the difference between danger and distraction, staying close enough to Maya to anchor her, yet constantly scanning as if her eyes were lanterns no storm could snuff. Marcus positioned Maya behind stacked feed sacks and an old workbench where she could see the doors but not be silhouetted. He handed her the flashlight again, and the gesture felt less like giving a tool and more like crowning her with responsibility. "If you see movement, squeeze my arm," he said. "Don't shout." Maya nodded, fingers trembling around the light, and Bella nudged her wrist once, as if sealing the agreement. The first heavy impact came at the cabin, not the barn, a distant crack and thud swallowed by the blizzard. They were testing, not pleading. Maya pictured the clean-smiled man on her porch and felt a flash of anger, bright as a flare in whiteout. Then footsteps in the yard, multiple, fast and coordinated, not the messy panic of lost hikers, but the steady rhythm of people who believed they owned every ending. The barn's main door shuddered as something bumped it from outside, then paused, as if the attacker wanted to listen to fear. Marcus's gaze sharpened, his body tightening into a posture Maya recognized from rescue work, the calm right before chaos. A voice carried through the wood, mild as warm tea. "Ma'am," it called, "it's Grant Holloway with Vanguard. We can do this the easy way." Grant Holloway stepped into the barn a moment later, with two men flanking him, using the blizzard as cover and confidence as armor. He was the same man from the porch, mid-40s, tall, smooth-shaven, hair neatly cut, coat dark and expensive, and eyes pale and oddly serene. Up close, his face had the kind of symmetrical handsomeness that might have belonged on a campaign poster, except nothing in him asked for votes, only compliance. His politeness wasn't kindness. It was a weapon sharpened to look civilized. Behind him moved two operators in matte gear, faces half hidden, their posture all angles and practiced caution. Grant's voice stayed almost gentle. "We don't want to frighten you," he said, as if fear were a minor inconvenience. "We only want what your guest is carrying." Marcus stepped out from shadow like a door closing. For an instant, Grant's perfect calm flickered, the slightest tightening around the mouth, the recognition of a man who'd expected weakness and found steel. "Lieutenant," Grant said, as if they were old colleagues, "you're injured. You don't need to make this heroic." Marcus didn't answer with bravado. He answered with stillness, and that stillness had the weight of training and love for strangers who didn't deserve to be collateral. Bella lunged forward, not to attack wildly, but to disrupt, a burst of gray and muscle that forced Grant's men to shift their aim and footing. Maya's heart seized, but Bella's movement was clean and purposeful, like a shield that knew exactly where to be. In the scramble, Marcus moved Maya backward with one guiding hand, keeping his body between her and the threat, and Maya realized the tenderness in him wasn't softness. It was discipline shaped into protection. Grant's mask finally slipped. His voice cooled, the velvet falling away to reveal iron. "Sterilize," he said, not loud, not dramatic, just matter-of-fact, like ordering the floor mopped. The word hit Maya like a slap. She saw in it every story of people erased because they were inconvenient. She saw her own years of hiding, the way silence can become a slow kind of self-erasure. Marcus gained the advantage in a tight, controlled struggle that ended with Grant stumbling, breath sharp, and Marcus holding Grant's weapon hand pinned. Marcus could have ended it right there. Maya saw it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes went momentarily distant, as if he'd stepped into a darker room inside himself. The storm outside howled, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the whole world was urging the fastest, simplest solution. Then Maya stepped between them. She was shaking, tears freezing on her lashes, but her voice came out steady. "If you do it," she said to Marcus, "then he wins twice. He turns you into him." Bella, breath quick, pressed her head against Marcus's knee, a soft, aching nudge that said what Maya couldn't. "Don't let the blizzard inside you take the wheel." Marcus's stare snapped back to the present. He looked at Maya, at Bella, at Grant's pale eyes full of cold certainty, and something in Marcus's expression shifted from fury to choice. He lowered the weapon. He didn't forgive. He simply refused to become the thing he was fighting. Grant stared, stunned, then furious in a way that cracked his composure. But before the situation could tilt again, the blizzard began to thin, the wind dropping as if exhausted by its own rage. Distant sirens rose through the whitening air, growing clearer with every second. A state trooper arrived first, Trooper Alex Ramirez, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with weathered skin, a salt-and-pepper mustache, and the wary eyes of someone who'd learned that quiet places can still hide big crimes. He took in the barn, the scattered gear, the restrained men, and his expression tightened. "I got a call routed from a federal tip line," he said, voice pragmatic. "Said there was an armed situation and evidence of a major conspiracy." Behind him, more vehicles came, dark SUVs and agents in windbreakers, moving fast and controlled. One of them, Special Agent Nora Hale, tall and lean with tightly pulled hair and a face that looked carved from resolve, approached with a tablet already lit. "The upload hit our servers," she said, eyes flicking from Marcus to Maya to Bella with professional assessment. "We traced it here." Grant tried to speak, tried to reclaim power with words, but handcuffs are a language even smooth men can't talk over. As the agents worked, Maya stood in the barn doorway and, hands shaking, called her mother for the first time in years. Her voice cracked mid-sentence, but she said the words anyway. "I'm alive. I'm sorry. I miss you." Bella was later honored in town in a small ceremony that felt like sunlight after a long winter. Children tying a bright ribbon around her neck, while Bella accepted the attention with dignified tolerance until someone threw a tennis ball, which immediately became the only thing that mattered. Months later, spring returned to the valley like an apology written in green. Marcus came back quietly, without fanfare, his presence as steady as a fence post that doesn't move in wind. He helped Maya repair the fence, replace broken boards, and plant a thin row of hardy flowers by the porch, the kind that keep blooming even when nights still bite. Their love didn't arrive like fireworks. It arrived like tea set down between two tired hands, warm, modest, and real. One evening, Bella trotted up with that worn tennis ball, dropped it right between them, and looked from one face to the other as if officiating a treaty. Maya laughed. Marcus's mouth curved into a soft smile, and in that sound the last of the storm finally let go. Some storms don't come to destroy. They come to uncover what was buried under fear, grief, and silence. In that whiteout, Maya didn't find a headline or a hero. She found a thread of mercy. And somehow, through a dog's loyal heartbeat and a wounded man's courage, that thread became a rope strong enough to pull 3 lives back from the edge. If you believe in miracles, here is one you can hold in your hands. God often sends help in forms that don't look grand at first. A barking German shepherd, a stranger at a fence, a brave choice not to become the darkness you're fighting. Scripture reminds us we are never abandoned in the storm, and sometimes the rescue arrives exactly when we're sure it won't, in a way only heaven could choreograph. In everyday life, the blizzard may not be snow. It may be loneliness after loss, anxiety that tightens the chest, a family conflict that won't thaw, or a quiet fatigue no one else can see. But the lesson is the same. Take one step, then the next. Let love be your flashlight. Let faith be your shelter. And when you have the chance to repay evil with evil, choose the harder miracle. Keep your humanity. That is how God turns survival into healing. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs a little hope tonight. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what storm you're walking through, so this community can lift you up. And don't forget to subscribe, because another story is waiting that might be the exact encouragement God meant for you to hear. May God bless you, protect your home, strengthen your heart, and guide you safely through every storm. In Jesus' name, amen.